Hello everyone. My name is Caleb Dawson, and today I'm going to share with you the most disturbing, the most bone-chilling, the most absolutely terrifying experience of my entire life. Something that happened last October. Something that still, to this very day, keeps me awake at night, drenched in cold sweat, shaking, trembling, unable to close my eyes without seeing, without remembering, without reliving every single horrifying moment of what I discovered, what I uncovered in my grandmother's basement. But before we dive deep, before we descend into this nightmare together, I need to tell you something important, something you need to understand about my grandmother Aurora. Every single year, without fail, like clockwork, my grandmother would go absolutely insane with her Halloween decorations. And when I say insane, I don't mean a few pumpkins on the porch, a couple of fake skeletons hanging from trees, no. No, I'm talking about transforming her entire property. Her massive Victorian house, her sprawling yard, her garden, her driveway, everything, absolutely everything, covered, draped, filled with the most realistic, the most horrifyingly detailed, the most convincing Halloween decorations you have ever seen in your entire life. People, families, children, teenagers, adults, they would drive from all over Manchester, from Liverpool, from Birmingham. Some even came from London, hours and hours of driving, just to see her displays, just to walk through her yard, just to take photographs with these incredibly lifelike, these disturbingly realistic, these almost too perfect decorations. But what I found out, what I discovered hidden in her basement workshop, it wasn't decorations at all. It was something far worse, something far more sinister, something that will haunt me until the day I die. Now, before I continue, before I take you deeper into this horror, I need to pause for just a moment. I can see that 85% of my viewers, the majority of people watching this video right now, haven't subscribed to my channel, and I need to ask you, if you're enjoying this content, if you're sitting there, gripped by this story, your heart racing, your palms sweating, then please hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, ring that notification bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. You don't want to miss the other stories I have to share, the other nightmares I've lived through, the other horrors I've witnessed. Also, I absolutely love hearing from you all. So comment down below. Tell me where you're watching this from. What city? What country? What time it is in your part of the world? Are you watching this alone in the dark? Are you watching this with friends? Are you brave enough to watch this before bed? Tell me. I read every single comment. I reply to as many as I can. And if you have your own horror story, your own paranormal experience, your own encounter with something unexplainable, please email us or leave it in the comment section. Because your stories, they matter. They deserve to be heard. They deserve to be shared. Now, let's get back to this nightmare. Let's dive deeper. Let's go back to where it all began. It all started 3 weeks before Halloween last year, October 8th to be exact. I was 24 years old at the time, living in a small, cramped, one-bedroom apartment in Bristol, about 2 hours away, 2 long hours of winding country roads from my grandmother Aurora's house. She lived in this absolutely massive Victorian mansion. And when I say massive, I mean enormous, intimidating, overwhelming. On the very outskirts of Edinburgh, perched on a hill, overlooking the countryside, isolated, alone. The kind of house that even without any decorations, even in the middle of summer, looked like it belonged in a gothic horror movie. The house itself was 3 full stories tall, made of dark gray stone, almost black in certain lighting, with these tall, narrow, Gothic-style windows that seemed to watch you, seemed to follow your movements, and surrounding the entire property was this massive wrought iron fence, 10 feet high, with sharp spikes at the top, with a gate that always creaked when you opened it. That sound, that horrible screeching sound, I can still hear it in my nightmares, even now. Even here, thousands of miles away. My grandmother Aurora, she was 78 years old when she died, but she didn't look it. She didn't act it. She was strong, vibrant, full of energy, with long silver hair that she always wore in a tight bun, with these piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you, that seemed to know your secrets, your fears, your darkest thoughts. And she had been decorating for Halloween, creating these elaborate displays, these horrifying scenes, for as long as I could remember, since I was a small child, since before I was born even. But here's the thing. Here's what made her decorations different. What made them special. What made them terrifying. These weren't your typical store-bought decorations. Nothing from Spirit Halloween or Amazon. No. These were completely custom-made, handcrafted, personally designed, and created by my grandmother herself. Hyperrealistic doesn't even begin to describe them. They were beyond realistic. They were perfect. Too perfect. She had full-sized figures, life-sized replicas, that looked like actual corpses, actual dead bodies in various stages of decay. Skeletons that seemed to have real bones, actual human bones, not plastic, not rubber, and props. Oh God, the props. They were so convincing, so detailed, so anatomically correct, that the local police had been called multiple times, dozens of times over the years, by concerned neighbors, by passing motorists, by people who genuinely believed, who were absolutely convinced that they were looking at real bodies, real crime scenes, real death. Every single year, without fail, the decorations got more elaborate, more disturbing, more realistic, more detailed, more horrifying. And every year, starting in March or April, 6 or 7 months before Halloween, my grandmother would disappear into her basement, into her workshop, and she would spend months, countless hours, day after day, night after night, preparing them, creating them, perfecting them. She had this massive basement workshop. I knew it was down there. I knew she spent all her time down there. But she never, absolutely never, let anyone go down there, not me, not my parents, not my Uncle Thomas, not my Aunt Penelope, not even my late grandfather Edmund before he passed away 15 years ago. That basement was completely off limits, absolutely forbidden, a sacred space that only she was allowed to enter. I remember so clearly, when I was just a kid, maybe 7 or 8 years old, asking her, begging her, Grandma, please, can I help you make the decorations? Can I come down to the basement with you? I want to see how you do it. I want to learn. And she would always stop what she was doing. She would turn and look at me, and she would smile, this strange, peculiar, unsettling smile that never quite reached her eyes, that never looked genuine, that always seemed to hide something darker, something sinister. And she would say in this soft, gentle voice, "No, sweetheart, no, my dear, this is Grandma's special project. This is my art, my passion. You wouldn't understand the artistic process, the dedication it requires, the commitment, the sacrifices. Maybe when you're older, maybe when you're ready, maybe someday." But that someday never came. It never arrived, because she kept putting me off year after year, excuse after excuse, and eventually, after a decade or more, I stopped asking. I just accepted it. Accepted that the basement was her private domain, that her Halloween decorations were her obsession, her secret hobby, her personal project, and I never, not once, not in my entire life, questioned it further. I trusted her. I loved her. I believed her. The call came on October 8th, a Tuesday. It was around 3 in the afternoon. I was at work, sitting at my desk, typing away at some meaningless report, when my phone rang. I saw it was my mother, Diana, and something in my gut, some instinct, some premonition, told me something was wrong, terribly wrong. I answered, and her voice, oh God, her voice was shaking, trembling, breaking. "Caleb," she said, barely able to get the words out. "Your grandmother, Aurora, she's had a fall, a terrible fall. She's in the hospital, in critical condition. They don't think she has much time left. The doctors say it could be hours, maybe days. But you need to come. You need to come right now. Please, please hurry." I didn't even respond. I couldn't. I just hung up, grabbed my jacket, my keys, and ran to my car, and I drove. I drove those 2 hours in what felt like 20 minutes, my mind racing, my heart pounding, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My grandmother Aurora. She had always been this pillar of strength, this unshakable presence in my life. The idea that she was dying, that she was vulnerable, that she could be taken from us. It didn't seem real. It didn't seem possible. It couldn't be happening. When I finally arrived at the hospital in Edinburgh, the Royal Infirmary, I ran through the parking lot, through the entrance, down the corridors, following the signs to the intensive care unit, and there in the waiting room, sitting in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, were my parents, my mother Diana, with her eyes red and swollen from crying, mascara running down her cheeks, and my father Richard, normally so stoic, so composed, looking absolutely devastated, destroyed. And there was also my Aunt Penelope, my grandmother's younger sister, 74 years old, who lived all the way in Wellington, New Zealand. She had flown in, traveled for over 24 hours. As soon as she heard the news, she was sitting there, her face pale, her hands trembling, but her eyes were different. They weren't sad. They weren't grieving. They were calculating, watching, observing everyone and everything. My mother stood up when she saw me, rushed over, embraced me, held me so tight I could barely breathe, and she sobbed into my shoulder, telling me over and over, "She's dying. She's dying. Our Aurora is dying." After a few minutes, after we had all tried to compose ourselves, a doctor appeared, tired-looking woman, probably in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back, wearing scrubs and a white coat. Her name tag read Dr. Hazel Whitmore, and she pulled us aside into a small private room, and she explained the situation. She told us what had happened, and it was worse than we imagined. My grandmother Aurora had fallen down the basement stairs, those old wooden stairs that led to her workshop, her sanctuary, and it had been a catastrophic fall. She had tumbled all the way down, hitting her head multiple times on the hard wooden steps, and at the bottom, she had landed badly, very badly. She had severe head trauma, multiple skull fractures, internal bleeding in her brain, broken ribs, punctured lung, a fractured hip, fractured vertebrae, and at her age, 78 years old, with her medical history, with osteoporosis and high blood pressure and a weak heart, there wasn't much they could do. There were no surgical options, no treatments that would help. She was sedated, on morphine for the pain, comfortable. But it was only a matter of time, hours, maybe a day or two at most, and then she would be gone. We took turns sitting with her, in that small, sterile, beeping hospital room, holding her cold hand, stroking her silver hair, telling her we loved her, sharing memories, crying, praying, hoping for some miracle that we all knew wouldn't come. And for 2 days, she remained unconscious, unresponsive, her breathing shallow, her heartbeat weak and irregular. But then on the third day, October 11th, around 6 in the evening, something changed. I was sitting alone with her. My parents had gone to get coffee. My Aunt Penelope was making phone calls in the hallway. And suddenly my grandmother's eyes opened, just slightly, just barely, and she looked directly at me. Those piercing blue eyes, now clouded with pain, with drugs, with approaching death, focused entirely on my face. Her grip on my hand, which had been so weak, so gentle, suddenly became vice-like, painful, her fingers digging into my skin like claws, and she tried to speak, her lips moving, her throat working. But only whispers came out, raspy, desperate whispers. "Caleb," she said, my voice barely audible. "Caleb, listen to me. Listen carefully. The basement. You have to go to the basement. You have to clean it. Clean it before anyone sees, before anyone else goes down there. Promise me, please. Promise me you'll do it alone. Don't let anyone else down there. Not your parents, not Penelope, no one. Just you, only you, please. I'm begging you, promise me." I was confused, frightened, scared by the intensity in her eyes, by the desperation in her voice. But she was my grandmother. She was dying. And if this was her dying wish, her final request, how could I refuse? How could I say no? So I nodded, squeezing her hand back. "I promise, Grandma," I whispered. "I promise I'll take care of it. I'll go alone. I'll clean the basement. Just rest now, please. Please just rest. Everything will be okay." She stared at me for another long moment, as if searching my face, as if trying to determine if I was telling the truth. And then she smiled, that same strange smile from my childhood, and she closed her eyes, and her grip relaxed, and she never opened them again. 6 hours later, just after midnight, with all of us gathered around her bed, her heart stopped, the monitors flatlined, and my grandmother Aurora was gone, leaving behind only questions, only mysteries, only that strange final request that I didn't understand, not yet anyway. The funeral was 4 days later, October 15th, and it was exactly the kind of day you'd expect for a funeral in Scotland, grey, cold, miserable, with thick fog rolling in from the countryside, refusing to lift, refusing to give us even a moment of sunshine, of warmth, of hope. We buried her in the family plot, in the old cemetery on the edge of Edinburgh, next to my grandfather Edmund, under an ancient oak tree that looked like it had been there for centuries. The funeral was well attended, dozens and dozens of people, neighbors, friends, people from town, people whose lives she had touched, and everyone, absolutely everyone, mentioned her Halloween decorations, how amazing they were, how realistic, how she was an artist, a genius, how the neighborhood wouldn't be the same without her displays, and every comment, every compliment, made my stomach turn, made me feel sick, because I kept thinking about her final words, about the basement, about what she wanted me to clean, about what she was so desperate to hide. After the burial, after we had thrown handfuls of dirt onto her coffin, after the priest had said his final prayers, everyone went back to her house, to the Victorian mansion on the hill, for the reception, for food and drinks and more stories about Aurora and her wonderful life, her generosity, her creativity, her kindness. But all I could think about, all I could focus on, was that basement, that locked door in the kitchen, that promise I had made. The house was packed, filled with people, relatives I hadn't seen in years, neighbors offering condolences, friends sharing memories, and I waited, patiently, anxiously, nervously, for them to leave, for the crowd to thin, for everyone to finally go home. I smiled when I was supposed to. I thanked people for coming. I accepted their hugs and their sympathy. But inside I was screaming. Inside I needed everyone to leave. I needed to get to that basement. I needed to fulfill my promise. I needed to know what my grandmother was hiding. Finally around 8 o'clock in the evening, as darkness fell, as the fog grew thicker, the last guests departed. My parents, exhausted, emotionally drained, asked if I wanted to come with them to their hotel in town. They had booked rooms. They didn't want to stay in the house. Too many memories, too much grief. But I told them, I lied to them, that I wanted to stay, that I needed time alone with Grandma's things, to process everything, to grieve in my own way, to feel close to her one last time. And they understood, or at least they thought they understood. They had no idea what I was really planning, what I was about to discover. My Aunt Penelope also left, going with my parents to the hotel, and she gave me this long, searching look as she walked out the door, this strange expression that I couldn't quite read. Was it concern? Was it suspicion? Was it something else? I didn't know. I couldn't tell. But something about the way she looked at me, something about the way her eyes lingered on my face, made me uncomfortable, made my skin crawl. And then, finally, I was alone, completely alone in that massive Victorian house. 3 stories of empty rooms, of shadows and silence, of memories and now secrets. I stood in the hallway for a moment, just breathing, just listening to the creaking of the old house settling, the wind outside, the distant sound of traffic. And then I moved, walking through the house, checking every room, making absolutely certain I was alone, that no one had stayed behind, that I truly had the house to myself. Satisfied, or as satisfied as I could be, I made my way to the kitchen, to that door, that seemingly innocent door that looked like it led to a pantry. But I knew better. I had known for years that behind that door, behind that locked door, was the stairway to the basement, to my grandmother's workshop, to her secret space, to whatever she was so desperate to keep hidden, to whatever she needed me to clean up before anyone else could see. I reached for the door handle, my hand shaking, trembling, and I tried to turn it. But of course it was locked, secured, protected. I had expected this. My grandmother had always kept it locked, always kept the key with her, hidden somewhere safe. So I began searching methodically, carefully, through drawers in the kitchen, through cabinets, through her bedroom upstairs, through her desk in the study, through jewelry boxes and closets and under mattresses, looking for a key. Any key. The key that would open that door, that would let me into the basement, that would reveal the truth. It took me almost an hour of searching, of growing frustration, of increasing anxiety, before I finally found it in her bedroom, in an antique jewelry box on her dresser. Underneath a false bottom, hidden beneath layers of velvet, there was a small key ring, and on it were 3 keys, 3 old, ornate keys with strange markings etched into the metal, symbols I didn't recognize, patterns that seemed almost ritualistic, almost occult. One of the keys, I knew, had to be for the basement door, the largest one, the oldest one, with the most elaborate markings. I took the key ring, gripping it tight in my hand, and I made my way back downstairs, back to the kitchen, back to that door. And my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I could hear it. Hear the blood rushing in my ears. Hear my own ragged breathing. Why was I so nervous? Why was I so afraid? It was just a basement, just a workshop, just where she made decorations, just where she crafted her art. There was nothing to be scared of, nothing to worry about, right? But somewhere deep inside, some primitive instinct, some ancient part of my brain, was screaming at me, telling me to stop, telling me not to open that door, telling me to run, to leave, to forget my promise, to never discover what was waiting down there in the darkness. But I had made a promise, a dying wish, and I couldn't. I wouldn't break it, not for my grandmother, not for Aurora. So I inserted the largest key into the lock, and I turned it slowly, hearing the mechanism click, hearing the lock disengage, and then I pulled the door open, and immediately I was hit by a smell, a horrible, nauseating, overwhelming smell. It was the smell of rot, of decay, of decomposition, of death, mixed with chemicals, with formaldehyde or something similar, with something sweet and artificial trying to mask the underlying stench. I gagged, covering my nose and mouth with my shirt, my eyes watering, my stomach lurching. But I had come this far. I couldn't stop now. I couldn't turn back. Before we continue, before we go any further down those stairs, I need to pause again. I need to ask you, are you still watching? Are you still with me on this journey into darkness? If you are, if you're gripped by this horror, if you need to know what happens next, then please make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you've hit that like button, because what comes next, what I found down there, it's going to get so much worse, so much more terrifying, so much more horrifying than anything you can imagine. And I need your support. I need to know that sharing this trauma, reliving this nightmare, is helping someone, is warning someone, is making a difference. Comment below. Tell me, are you scared yet? Are you watching this alone? Would you have opened that door? Would you have kept that promise? I want to know. I need to know that I'm not alone in this, that someone understands, that someone believes me. Now let's continue. Let's descend into hell together. I found a light switch at the top of the stairs, an old-fashioned switch, the kind you have to push, and I flipped it, and a single bare bulb, just one weak bulb, illuminated the stairway, casting lawn arc, dancing shadows on the walls. The stairs themselves were wooden, old, worn, creaking with age, and I could actually see dark stains on some of the steps, stains that looked like blood. That had to be blood, my grandmother's blood from her fall, from her fatal tumble down these very stairs. I descended slowly, carefully, placing each foot deliberately, testing each step before putting my full weight on it, remembering, always remembering, that these same stairs had killed my grandmother just days ago. That they were dangerous, treacherous, deadly. The smell grew stronger with each step, more intense, more overpowering, and I had to stop halfway down, had to lean against the wall, had to breathe through my mouth, forcing myself not to vomit, not until I saw, not until I knew. At the bottom of the stairs, maybe 15 steps down, there was another door. This one wasn't locked. The handle turned easily, too easily, and I pushed it open slowly, hesitantly. And what I saw, what I found in that basement, I need you to understand. I need you to know that what I'm about to describe, it's real, it happened, it's not fiction. It's not a story I made up for views. This is the truth. This is what destroyed my life. This is what turned me into the broken person I am today. The basement was enormous, far larger than I had ever imagined. It stretched under the entire house, maybe even beyond the house, under the yard. I couldn't tell where it ended. The ceiling was high, at least 10 feet, maybe 12, and the space was divided into sections, different areas for different purposes, and everywhere I looked, there were things, horrible things, terrifying things, impossible things. The walls were lined with shelves, floor to ceiling shelves, filled with jars, hundreds of jars, thousands of jars, containing, oh God, containing things, organs, eyes, teeth, fingers, pieces of human anatomy floating in clear liquid, preserved, labeled, organized by type and size and date, and between the shelves, hanging from hooks screwed into the walls, were tools, saws, knives, scalpels, cleavers, instruments I didn't recognize, instruments I didn't want to recognize, all clean, all shiny, all ready to be used. There were workbenches, multiple workbenches, each one covered with equipment, with materials, with supplies for some grotesque craft, needles and thread, wire and glue, paints and dyes, chemicals and bottles with warning labels, with skull and crossbones, with words like toxic and caustic and flammable. And scattered among all of this were notebooks, journals, binders full of notes and diagrams and sketches, instructions for some nightmarish art project. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, the part that made my knees weak, that made my vision blur, that made me question reality itself, was the ceiling, because hanging from the ceiling, suspended on chains and hooks and wires, were figures, dozens of figures, maybe 50 or more. And they looked like people. They looked exactly like people, hanging there like sides of beef in a butcher's shop. And as I stepped closer, as I forced myself to approach them, to examine them, I realized with growing horror, with absolute terror, that they weren't just realistic, they weren't just convincing, they were real. These were real human bodies, real dead people, preserved somehow, treated with chemicals, turned into decorations, into props, into things. I stumbled backward, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. No, this couldn't be real. This had to be fake. These had to be incredibly well-made props. My grandmother was an artist, craftsperson. She had just gotten really, really good at making things look real. That had to be it. That had to be the explanation. Because the alternative was impossible, was insane, was evil beyond comprehension. But then I reached out. I couldn't help myself. I had to know. I had to touch one, to prove to myself that it was fake, that it was rubber or latex or silicone. I touched the nearest figure, a hanging body of a man, middle-aged, maybe 45 or 50, with a look of absolute terror frozen on his face, his mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes wide and glassy, and the skin, oh God, the skin was cold, leathery, preserved, but unmistakably real. This was real human skin. This was a real human body. This man had been alive once, had been a person with a life, with a family, with dreams, and now he was hanging here in my grandmother's basement, turned into a Halloween decoration. I pulled my hand back as if burned, and I did vomit then, right there on the concrete floor. I doubled over and emptied my stomach, heaving, gasping, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't possible. My grandmother, sweet Aurora, who baked cookies and knitted sweaters and donated to the church, she couldn't be. She couldn't have been a serial killer, a murderer, a monster who killed people and turned them into decorations. But the evidence was everywhere, surrounding me, suffocating me. Dozens of bodies, dozens of victims, all preserved, all displayed, all transformed into props for Halloween displays. The displays that people had loved, had admired, had photographed, had posed with, not knowing, never suspecting, that they were standing next to real corpses, real human remains. I needed to leave. I needed to get out. I needed to call the police, but something made me look around more. Something made me explore further, some morbid curiosity, some need to understand the full extent of this horror. So I moved deeper into the basement, past the hanging bodies, past the shelves of jars, into the back section where the light was dimmer, where shadows pooled in corners. And there, right there in the center of this back area, was a large metal table, like an autopsy table or a surgical table, with channels carved into the surface for drainage, with restraints attached to the corners, and on that table, laid out like she was sleeping, was a body, a fresh body. A young woman who couldn't have been dead for more than a few days. She was in her mid-20s, with long red hair spread around her head like a halo, with pale, almost white skin, and she was being worked on. There were tools around her, surgical instruments, scalpels and scissors and forceps and needles, and parts of her skin, sections of her arms and legs and torso, had been carefully removed, peeled away, revealing the muscle and tissue beneath, and those removed sections. They were laid out beside her, treated with chemicals, preserved, prepared to be attached to something, to be used for something. I staggered backward again, hitting a workbench, sending bottles and tools clattering to the floor, the sound echoing through the basement, through the house. And in that moment, in that horrible moment of realization, I understood. I finally understood what my grandmother had been doing all these years, Why her decorations were so realistic, so detailed, so perfect. Because they weren't decorations at all. They were people, real people who had disappeared, who had been reported missing, who had been mourned by their families, all of them. Killed by my grandmother, murdered and preserved and displayed, and everyone in Manchester and Edinburgh and beyond, had looked at them, had admired them, had called them art, never knowing, never suspecting the truth. How many people, how many victims, how many lives had she taken? 10, 20, 50. I couldn't count them all, couldn't process the scale of this nightmare. And how long? How many years had she been doing this? Decades, most of my life, maybe longer, maybe since before I was born, since before my mother was born. This could have been going on for generations, a family tradition passed down, a legacy of murder and horror. I needed to call the police. I needed to expose this. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, with fingers that wouldn't work properly, and I started to dial 999, the emergency number. But before I could press the final digit, before I could make the call, I heard something, a sound that made my blood turn to ice, that made my heart stop, that made every survival instinct scream at me to run. It was breathing, raspy, wet, labored, struggling, coming from somewhere nearby, from somewhere in this basement. Someone was alive down here. Someone was breathing. Someone had survived. I slowly, carefully, quietly moved toward the sound, my phone still in my hand, my thumb hovering over the call button, ready to dial at any moment, moving past more workbenches, past more shelves, past more hanging bodies, following that horrible breathing sound, until I reached the far back corner of the basement, the darkest corner, where the single bulb barely reached, where shadows consumed everything. And there, chained to the wall, secured with heavy iron manacles around his wrists and ankles, was a man, a living man, barely alive but definitely breathing. And when he saw me, when his eyes focused on my face, he made a sound, a horrible gurgling sound, trying to speak, trying to call for help. But his throat was damaged, ruined, maybe cut, maybe burned. I couldn't tell in the dim light. I rushed to him. God, I whispered, "Oh God, you're alive. Just hold on. I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to get help. Just hold on, please. Please hold on." The man was maybe 40 years old, though it was hard to tell. He was emaciated, skeletal. His skin stretched tight over bones, covered in wounds and scars and bruises in various stages of healing. He had been here for weeks, maybe months, maybe longer, suffering, tortured, kept alive for some purpose I didn't want to imagine. And his eyes were filled with such pain, such despair, such hopelessness. But also, when he saw me, when he realized I wasn't my grandmother, there was a flicker of something else, hope, desperate, fragile hope. I examined the chains. They were old but strong, attached to the wall with bolts, locked with padlocks. I tried pulling on them, tried breaking them, but they wouldn't budge. I need to find keys. I told him, I need to find something to cut these. Just hold on. I'll be right back. But as I turned to search for tools, for bolt cutters or a hacksaw or keys, I heard another sound, a different sound, a sound that made everything worse, the sound of footsteps, footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, careful footsteps. Someone was coming down to the basement. Someone else knew about this place. Someone else had a key. I froze, my entire body going rigid, my mind racing. Who else knew? Who else was involved in this? It couldn't be my parents. They couldn't know. They wouldn't. They couldn't be part of this. But then who? Who was coming down those stairs? Who was about to discover me here? Surrounded by evidence, surrounded by bodies, standing next to a man chained to the wall. The footsteps reached the bottom. The door opened, and standing there, silhouetted against the light from the stairway, illuminated from behind, was my Aunt Penelope, my grandmother's sister, the woman who had flown all the way from New Zealand, the woman who should have been at the hotel with my parents, but instead she was here, in this house, coming down to this basement, with a look on her face that told me everything I needed to know. She looked at me, her eyes scanning my face, reading my expression, understanding immediately what I had discovered, what I had seen, and then she looked around the basement at the bodies, at the workshop, at the man chained to the wall, and then back at me, and slowly she smiled. That same smile, that exact same smile my grandmother used to give, the one that never reached the eyes, The one that hid something dark, something evil, something inhuman. "Oh, Caleb," she said, her voice soft, gentle, almost disappointed, like a teacher whose student had failed a test. "I was really hoping we'd have more time before you found out. Aurora told me, before she died, that she had asked you to clean up, to take care of things, to dispose of the evidence. I should have known, should have realized, that you would look first, that you would investigate, that your curiosity would get the better of you. I should have come here immediately, should have beaten you here. I was too slow, too cautious, too careful." She stepped further into the basement, pulling the door closed behind her, and I heard it, heard the click of a lock. We were sealed and trapped together in this nightmare, in this tomb filled with evidence of decades of murder, of horror, of unspeakable evil. "Penelope," I stammered, my voice barely working, my throat tight. What is all this? What did Grandma do? Why are there bodies? Why is there a man chained to the wall? We need to call the police. We need to get help. We need to." She held up her hand, silencing me, and she laughed. Actually laughed, a soft, musical, completely inappropriate laugh that echoed through the basement, making everything feel even more surreal, even more horrifying, even more wrong. "Oh, Caleb," she said again, shaking her head. "You really don't understand, do you? You really have no idea, no comprehension, no grasp of what Aurora was doing, of what we've been doing, of what this family has been doing for generations, for centuries even. This isn't murder, sweetheart. This isn't evil. This is art. This is preservation. This is legacy. This is immortality." I backed away from her, moving toward the chained man, positioning myself between him and her, my phone still in my hand, still ready to call for help, to call the police, to expose everything, to end this nightmare. "Don't move," I said, trying to sound brave, trying to sound strong, but my voice was shaking, trembling, betraying my terror. "Stay right there, Penelope. I'm calling the police. I'm telling them everything, all of this, all of these victims, all of these people you and Grandma killed. It ends now, tonight, right now." She laughed again, harder this time, and she reached into her coat pocket, pulling something out. And my blood went cold when I saw what it was. Syringe, a large syringe filled with something, some liquid, some drug, something meant for me. "Caleb," she said, her voice taking on a harder edge, a more threatening tone. "We're not calling anyone. You're not telling anyone, because you're going to join the collection, just like all the others, just like all the people who discovered our secret, who stumbled upon the truth, who couldn't keep their mouths shut, who couldn't appreciate the artistry, the dedication, the perfection of what we create." She started moving toward me, slowly, deliberately, like a predator stalking prey, and I moved backward, matching her pace, keeping distance between us. But I was running out of room. The basement wall was behind me, getting closer, and the chained man beside me was making sounds, desperate sounds, trying to warn me, trying to help somehow despite his condition. I looked at my phone, at the screen, at the emergency number still waiting to be dialed, and I made a decision, a split-second choice. I pressed call. I hit the button, and immediately Penelope lunged, moving faster than I thought possible for a 74-year-old woman, faster than anyone that age should be able to move, and she crashed into me, slamming me against the wall, knocking the phone from my hand, sending it skittering across the concrete floor, away, out of reach, useless. We struggled, grappling, fighting, her hands trying to grab my arms, trying to pin me, trying to inject me with whatever was in that syringe, and I pushed back, twisted, kicked, fought with everything I had, with every ounce of strength, with pure survival instinct, because I knew, I absolutely knew, that if she got that needle into me, if she injected me with whatever was in there, I would end up like all the others, like all the bodies hanging from the ceiling, like the woman on the table, like the man chained to the wall. She was stronger than she looked, far stronger, impossibly strong, and I realized, I understood, that she must have been doing this for years, for decades, that this wasn't her first time restraining someone, subduing someone, preparing someone for whatever horrible fate awaited them. She had practice, experience, expertise. But I was younger. I was bigger. I was desperate, and somehow I managed to twist away, to break free from her grip, and I ran deeper into the basement, into the darker sections, past the hanging bodies that swayed as I brushed against them, past the workbenches, past the shelves of jars, looking for something. Anything, a weapon, an exit, another way out. Penelope followed, walking calmly, confidently, not running, not rushing, because she knew there was no escape. The door was locked, the windows were too small, too high, covered with bars. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. I was trapped, cornered, doomed. You know, she called out, her voice echoing through the basement, bouncing off walls. I actually liked you, Caleb. I always thought you were the smart one, the capable one, the one who might understand, who might appreciate what we do. Aurora thought so too. That's why she asked you to come, to clean up, to see everything. She thought maybe, just maybe, you could be trained, could be taught, could become the next keeper of our tradition. But I see now. I see that you're just like all the others, weak, squeamish, unable to see beyond conventional morality, unable to appreciate true art. I found myself in a corner, a small alcove filled with more supplies, more chemicals, more tools, and I grabbed something. The first thing my hand touched, a scalpel, small, sharp, deadly. Not much of a weapon against whatever training Penelope had, but it was something. It was better than nothing. She appeared at the entrance to the alcove, blocking the only way out, the syringe still in her hand, still ready. And she smiled at me. That horrible, familiar smile. Tell me, Caleb, she said, tilting her head, studying me like I was an interesting specimen, like I was already dead, already part of the collection. Did you ever wonder why Aurora's decorations were so popular, so beloved, so admired? People came from all over, from Liverpool, from Birmingham, from London. They brought their children. They took photographs. They touched them. They stood right next to them. And they never knew, never suspected, that they were real. They were actual human beings. Don't you see the beauty in that, the irony, the perfection? We put our art on display, in plain sight, for everyone to see. And no one ever knew. No one ever guessed the truth. She took another step closer, and I raised the scalpel, holding it out, pointing it at her, warning her. But she just laughed, completely unafraid, completely confident. What are you going to do with that? She asked. Stab me, cut me, kill me. Could you really do that, Caleb? Could you really hurt your dear Aunt Penelope, your grandmother's sister, your family? Because that's what we are, family. And family protects each other. Family keeps secrets. Family continues traditions, no matter how unconventional they might be. I don't want to hurt you, I said, my voice cracking, but I will. I swear I will. If you don't let me leave, if you don't back away, if you don't let me go, I'll do what I have to do. She sighed, a long, disappointed sigh, like I had said something foolish, something childish, something that revealed my ignorance. You still don't understand, she said, and then she moved faster than before, impossibly fast, and my hand with the scalpel, tried to react, tried to defend, tried to strike. But she was ready. She was prepared. She grabbed my wrist, twisted it so hard I heard something pop, felt something tear, and the scalpel fell from my hand, clattering to the floor, and the pain. Oh God, the pain in my wrist was excruciating, blinding, overwhelming. And then I felt the prick of a needle, felt the pressure of injection, felt something cold, something foreign, something wrong entering my bloodstream. She had done it. She had injected me. And I looked down, looked at my arm, saw the syringe, saw her thumb pressing the plunger, saw the liquid disappearing into my body, into my veins, spreading, flowing, reaching my heart, my brain, my everything. No, I whispered, no, no, no. What did you do? What did you give me? What was that? Penelope stepped back, removing the syringe, smiling that smile again, and she said, just a little something to make you compliant, to make you cooperative, to make you easier to work with. Don't worry. You won't die. Not yet anyway. Not for a while. We have so much work to do first, so much to teach you, so much to show you. You're going to learn the family business, Caleb. You're going to understand what Aurora started, what I've continued, what you'll carry forward, whether you want or not. I tried to move, tried to run, tried to fight, but my legs weren't working properly anymore. They felt heavy, sluggish, disconnected, and my vision was starting to blur, starting to tunnel, darkness creeping in from the edges, and I stumbled, fell to my knees, fell forward onto my hands, gasping, struggling, trying to stay conscious, trying to stay awake, try to maintain control of my body. But it was no use. Whatever she had injected me with, it was powerful. It was fast-acting. It was taking over, shutting down my voluntary muscles, paralyzing me, trapping me inside my own body. I could still think, still feel, still see and hear, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything except collapse onto the cold concrete floor, my cheek pressed against the ground, my eyes staring forward, watching Penelope's feet as she walked closer, as she crouched down beside me, as she stroked my hair like I was a child, like I was her pet, like I was already hers. There, she cooed. It's all right. Everything is going to be all right. Just relax. Just let the medicine do its work. You're safe now. You're home. You're exactly where you belong. With family. With your real family. The ones who understand you. Who can teach you. Who can help you reach your full potential. She stood up, and I heard her moving around. Heard dragging sounds, metal scraping, chains rattling. And then I felt hands, her hands grabbing me, lifting me. She was strong, so impossibly strong, and she dragged me across the floor, across the basement, toward that back corner, toward where the man was chained to the wall, toward empty manacles, waiting ready, meant for the next victim, meant for me. She secured my wrists first, closing the iron manacles around them, locking them with padlocks, and then my ankles, the metal cold against my skin, heavy, inescapable, permanent, and once I was fully restrained, fully secured, fully trapped, she stepped back, admiring her work, admiring me. Her newest acquisition, her latest project. Perfect, she said, absolutely perfect. You're going to make a wonderful addition, Caleb. You're young, healthy, strong, excellent bone structure, good skin quality. Aurora would be so proud, so happy, knowing that you'll be part of the legacy, part of the collection, part of what makes this family special, unique, extraordinary. She turned away, walking toward the shelves, pulling down jars, bottles, containers filled with chemicals and solutions and tools, and she brought them over, setting up a workspace beside me, arranging everything carefully, methodically, preparing for whatever came next, whatever horrible procedure she had planned. Now, she said, as she worked, as she organized her supplies, as she laid out surgical instruments on a clean cloth, I need to explain something to you, Caleb, something important, something you need to understand. This drug I gave you, it's very special, very rare, very expensive. It paralyzes your body completely. But it doesn't affect your mind, doesn't dull your senses, doesn't stop you from feeling, from experiencing, from understanding everything that's happening to you. You're going to be fully conscious, fully aware, for everything that comes next, every cut, every procedure, every transformation. And you know why. Do you know why we do it this way? I couldn't respond, couldn't answer, couldn't even move my eyes. I could only stare, only watch, only listen, as she continued. Because, she said, leaning close, whispering directly into my ear, the fear, terror, the absolute helplessness, it does something to the body, something chemical, something biological. It releases hormones, compounds, substances that preserve the tissue better, that make the skin more pliable, more workable, more beautiful. Aurora had discovered this decades ago. Through trial and error, through experimentation, the subjects who were conscious, who were aware, who were terrified, they made better materials, better decorations, better art. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that remarkable, science and art working together, creating something magnificent, something that will last forever? She picked up a scalpel, a larger one than I had grabbed, and she tested the blade against her thumb, drawing a thin line of blood, and she smiled, satisfied with its sharpness, satisfied with its readiness. Now, she said, positioning herself beside me, beside the chained man who was still alive, still breathing, still watching everything with those desperate, hopeless eyes. I'm going to start with him first. I need to finish what Aurora began before her unfortunate accident. She had been working on him for months, preparing him, treating him, getting him ready for this year's display. But she ran out of time. So I'll complete the work. And you, Caleb, you're going to watch. You're going to learn. You're going to see exactly how we transform living flesh into eternal art. And then it will be your turn. She approached the man, the chained man who had been trapped here for months, who had suffered unimaginable torments, and she placed the scalpel against his skin, against the shoulder, and she began to cut, slowly, precisely, expertly, and the man, he couldn't scream. His throat was too damaged, but his eyes screamed. His eyes conveyed every ounce of agony, every moment of suffering, every second of torture. And I watched, forced to watch, unable to look away, unable to close my eyes, unable to do anything except witness this horror, this nightmare, this evil that my family, my blood, my grandmother and great-aunt had been perpetrating for generations. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was knowing that soon, very soon, it would be my turn. I would be the one being cut, being carved, being transformed, being turned into a decoration, into a prop, into a thing. Penelope worked for hours. I don't know how long exactly. Time lost all meaning. But she was thorough, methodical, skilled. She removed sections of the man's skin, treated them with chemicals, preserved them. And all the while she talked, she explained, she taught, describing techniques and methods and secrets, sharing family knowledge, family traditions, family horror, as if she was passing down a cherished recipe, a valuable skill, a precious inheritance. The man eventually stopped breathing, stopped moving, stopped suffering, his body finally giving up, finally succumbing, finally finding peace in death. And Penelope sighed, a little disappointed, a little frustrated, that her subject had expired before she finished everything she wanted to do. But she continued working anyway, continued harvesting, continued preserving, making use of every usable piece, wasting nothing, respecting her materials, honoring her craft. And then she turned to me, wiping blood from her hands onto a cloth, wiping instruments clean, preparing for the next phase, for my phase. And she smiled, that horrible smile, and she said, "Your turn, Caleb. Your turn to become immortal. Your turn to become art. Your turn to join the family legacy." She approached me, scalpel in hand, and I tried. I tried so hard to move, to break free, to do something, anything. But the drug was still working, still paralyzing me, still trapping me. And I could feel tears, hot tears running down my face, down my cheeks, the only part of my body I could still control, the only way I could express my terror, my despair, my hopelessness. Penelope noticed the tears, and she wiped them away, gently, tenderly, like a mother comforting a child, and she said, "Don't cry, sweetheart. This is an honor, a privilege. Not everyone gets to become part of something greater, something eternal, something beautiful. Aurora chose you, specifically chose you, because she saw potential, because she loved you, because she wanted you to continue what she started. And even though you're not cooperating the way we hoped, even though you're resisting, you'll still serve the family. You'll still contribute. You'll still matter." She positioned the scalpel, placed it against my skin, against my arm, and I felt it, felt the cold metal, felt the pressure, felt the beginning of pain, sharp, intense, overwhelming. And I wanted to scream, wanted to beg, wanted to plead for mercy, but I couldn't. I could only lie there, could only endure, could only suffer. But then something happened, something unexpected, something that stopped Penelope mid-cut. A sound, a loud sound, from upstairs, from the main floor of the house. The sound of a door, the front door, being kicked open, being forced open, and voices, multiple voices, shouting, commanding, authoritative voices, police voices. "Police," they yelled. "This is the police. Edinburgh Metropolitan. We have a warrant. Nobody move. Show US your hands." Penelope froze, the scalpel still pressed against my skin, her eyes wide, shocked, confused. "How?" she whispered. "How did they know? How did they find us? We were so careful, so cautious, so protected." And then I remembered my phone. The call I had made, the emergency call. I had pressed it, had connected, and even though Penelope had knocked it away, had interrupted me, the call must have gone through, must have connected. The operator must have heard something. The struggle, the conversation, the evidence of danger, and they must have traced it, must have sent units, must have come to investigate. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets of footsteps, thundered through the house above, searching rooms, clearing spaces, getting closer, getting nearer, approaching the kitchen, approaching the basement door, approaching us. Penelope looked at me, looked at the man's body, looked at all the evidence surrounding us, and she made a decision, a calculated decision, a desperate decision. She dropped the scalpel, reached into her other pocket, pulled out another syringe, a different syringe, filled with something else, something darker, something that looked thick, viscous, wrong. "If I can't have you," she said, her voice cold, emotionless, mechanical, "then no one can. This family's secrets die with me, die with us, die here tonight." She removed the cap from the syringe, and she brought it toward her own neck, toward her carotid artery, ready to inject herself, ready to end it, ready to take the coward's way out, to escape justice, to avoid consequences, to deny the victims their vindication. But before she could, before the needle could pierce her skin, the basement door burst open, smashed inward, the lock breaking, with splintering, and police officers, armed officers, at least 6 or 7 of them, came pouring down the stairs, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating everything, exposing everything, revealing everything. "Drop the weapon," they shouted. "Drop it now. Hands in the air. Do it now." Penelope looked at them, looked at me one final time, and she smiled, that smile, and she said, "You'll never understand. None of you will ever understand what we created, what we achieved, what we gave to the world." And then she tried to inject herself anyway, tried to escape, tried to run from punishment. But the officers were faster, more prepared, more trained. They tackled her, swarmed her, wrestled the syringe from her hand, forced her to the ground, handcuffed her, secured her, arrested her, and she screamed with rage, with frustration, with the fury of someone whose life's work, whose family legacy, whose entire existence had been destroyed in a single moment. More officers came, flooding the basement, and their reactions, oh God, their reactions, as they saw what was down there, as they took in the hanging bodies, the jars of organs, the tools, the workshop, the evidence of decades of murder. Their faces went pale. Some of them turned away. Some of them vomited. Some of them just stood there, frozen in shock, unable to process the scale, the horror, the evil they had discovered. EMTs arrived next, rushing down with medical equipment, with stretchers, and they came to me first, seeing me chained to the wall, seeing the beginning of the cut on my arm, seeing the tears on my face, and they worked quickly, efficiently, checking my vitals, talking to me, asking questions I couldn't answer because I was still paralyzed, still trapped, still unable to move or speak. "We need to get him out of here," one of them said. "We need to get him to hospital immediately, administer the antidote, reverse the paralytic. He's been drugged with something serious, something dangerous." They worked on locks on the manacles, tried to find keys, and one of the officers, one who had taken Penelope away, came back down, holding the key ring, the same key ring I had found in my grandmother's bedroom, and they unlocked me, freed me, lifted me onto a stretcher, and they carried me up those stairs, up and out of that basement, out of that house, out of that nightmare. The last thing I saw, as they carried me through the kitchen, through the hallway, toward the front door, was Penelope sitting in the back of a police car, her hands cuffed behind her, her face pressed against the window, staring at the house, at her sister's house, at the place where their family secret had been kept for so long, and on her face there was no remorse, no regret, no guilt, only anger, only bitterness, only hatred directed at me, the person who had ruined everything, who had destroyed their legacy, who had exposed their art. I was rushed to hospital, to the same hospital where my grandmother had died just days earlier, and they treated me. They gave me something to counteract the paralytic, something to restore my movement, my speech, my control, and slowly, gradually, painfully feeling return to my body. I could move my fingers, my toes, my arms, my legs, and eventually I could speak, could breathe normally, could function again. But the physical recovery, that was nothing compared to the psychological damage, the trauma, the horror of what I had seen, what I had experienced, what I had learned about my family, about my grandmother, about the woman I had loved and trusted and admired my entire life. The police questioned me, extensively, repeatedly, wanting to know everything, everything I knew, everything I had seen, everything that had happened, and I told them. I told them all of it, holding nothing back, hiding nothing, exposing every detail, every horror, every victim. The investigation that followed, it was massive, unprecedented, shocking. The largest case in Scottish history. Perhaps in UK history, forensics teams descended on that house, that basement, cataloging everything, identifying victims, matching bodies to missing persons reports, some dating back 30 years, 40 years, even longer, and with each identification, with each name, came grieving families, devastated relatives, people who had spent years, decades, wondering what happened to their loved ones, their daughters, their sons, their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their brothers, and now they knew. Now they had answers, horrible, terrible, devastating answers. The media coverage was relentless. Everywhere I looked, every channel, every newspaper, every website, there were stories about the Edinburgh Horror House, about the Halloween killer, about Aurora and Penelope and their decades of murder, and my face, my name, Caleb Dawson, was plastered everywhere too, not as a suspect, but as a survivor, as the person who discovered it, who exposed it, who ended it. People wanted to interview me, journalists, podcasters, documentary filmmakers, true crime enthusiasts. Everyone wanted my story, wanted me to relive the trauma, to describe the horror, to share every detail. And at first I refused. I couldn't talk about it, couldn't think about it, couldn't process it without having panic attacks, without breaking down, without seeing those hanging bodies, those jars of organs, that man chained to the wall, Penelope approaching me with that scalpel. I went to therapy, extensive therapy, trauma counseling, PTSD treatment, medications for anxiety and depression and insomnia, but nothing helped, nothing worked, nothing could erase what I had seen, what I had learned, what I now knew about my family, about my heritage, about my bloodline. My parents, they were destroyed, completely broken. My mother, Diana, couldn't accept it, couldn't believe that her own mother, the woman who raised her, who loved her, who baked cookies and knitted sweaters and went to church every Sunday, could be a serial killer, could be a monster. She went into denial, complete denial, insisting there must be some mistake, some explanation, some way that Aurora was innocent, that she had been framed, that someone else had put those bodies there. My father, Richard, he just withdrew, became silent, stopped communicating, stopped working, stopped living really. He would sit for hours, days, staring at nothing, unable to reconcile the woman he had known for over 30 years, his mother-in-law, his children's grandmother, with the person she actually was, the murderer to the killer, the evil that had hidden behind a mask of normalcy. Penelope went to trial, a trial that lasted months, that dominated headlines, that revealed even more horrors, even more victims, even more evidence of systematic, calculated, prolonged murder spanning decades. And throughout it all, throughout every session, every testimony, every piece of evidence presented, she showed no remorse, no regret, no humanity. She defended what she and Aurora had done, called it art, called it legacy, called it family tradition. And when she was finally sentenced life imprisonment with no possibility of parole, she smiled, she actually smiled, and she said into the microphone, "Our work will outlive us all. What we created will be remembered. What we achieved will inspire others. You can imprison me, but you can't erase our legacy. You can't undo what we've done. You can't take back the beauty we gave to the world." The house, the Victorian mansion on the hill, was eventually demolished, torn down, every stone removed, every piece of wood burned, the ground excavated, searched for more victims, more evidence, more secrets, and they found them. They found more bodies buried in the yard, under the garden, near the fence, victims who hadn't made it to the basement, who had been disposed of differently, who had been hidden for even longer. The final victim count, when everything was tallied, when all the bodies were identified, when all the evidence was processed, was 63. 63 people, 63 lives, taken by my grandmother and great-aunt over a period of 47 years, nearly half a century of murder, of horror, of evil hiding in plain sight. And the worst part, the part that still haunts me, that still keeps me awake at night, is knowing that I had been there. I had visited that house. I had walked past that basement door. I had admired those decorations, those bodies. I had posed for photographs with them. I had touched them. I had complimented my grandmother on her artistry, on her talent, on her incredible realistic creations, never knowing, never suspecting, that I was praising her murder victims, that I was celebrating death, that I was admiring corpses. How many times had I walked past that man chained in the basement? How many times had I been in that house while he suffered, while he begged silently for help, while he endured torment And I never knew, never heard, never sensed anything wrong. I was complicit, not legally, not criminally, but morally. I should have known. I should have questioned. I should have investigated sooner. I couldn't stay in the UK, couldn't stay in Bristol, couldn't stay anywhere near Edinburgh. Everywhere I went, people recognized me, pointed, whispered, stared, some with sympathy, some with curiosity, some with accusation, as if I should have known, as if I was somehow responsible, as if sharing blood with monsters made me monstrous too. So I left. I moved. I came here, to the United States, to California, as far away as I could get, starting over, building a new life, trying to forget, trying to heal, trying to become someone new, someone not connected to that name, to that family, to that horror. But I can't forget. I'll never forget. I close my eyes and I see them. The hanging bodies, the jars, the man chained to the wall, Penelope with her scalpel approaching me, preparing to transform me, to kill me, to turn me into art. And I wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, my heart racing, my hands shaking, unable to distinguish nightmare from memory, because they're the same thing. They're all real. They all happened. That's why I started this channel, why I'm sharing this story, why I'm reliving this trauma in front of thousands of strangers, because I need people to know. I need the world to understand that evil, real evil, doesn't always look like what you expect. It doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always come with warning signs sometimes. Sometimes it looks like a kind grandmother, like a sweet old woman who bakes cookies and decorates for Halloween, like someone you love, someone you trust, someone you never suspect could be capable of such horror. And I need people to be vigilant, to be aware, to question, to investigate, because if Aurora and Penelope could hide 63 murders for 47 years, if they could display their victims publicly, openly, proudly, and no one, not neighbors, not police, not friends, not family ever suspected, then it can happen anywhere. It can happen to anyone. It could be happening right now, in your neighborhood, in your town, in your city. And you wouldn't know, you wouldn't see, you wouldn't suspect, until it was too late. So that's my story. That's my nightmare. That's the truth about what happened in my grandmother's basement, about what I discovered, about what I survived, and I know some of you won't believe me. Some of you will think this is fiction, that I made it up for views, for attention, for money. But I swear on everything I have, on everything I am, that this is real. This happened. These are real victims, real families, real lives destroyed by my family, by my blood, by people I loved. I want to thank all of you, everyone who watched this entire video, who sat through this horror story with me, who listened, who cared, who believed. It means more than you know, more than I can express. Sharing this, being this vulnerable, reliving this trauma. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also necessary. It's important. It's vital. Because these victims deserve to be remembered, their families deserve to be heard, and the truth, the horrible, terrible truth, deserves to be known. If you found this story impactful, if it affected you, if it made you think, if it opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, then please hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, ring that notification bell, because I have more stories to share, more experiences to relate, more truths to expose. And your support, your engagement, your presence makes all the difference, makes this worthwhile, makes the pain of reliving these memories bearable. And please comment down below. Tell me what you thought. Tell me if you believe me. Tell me your own experiences, your own stories, your own encounters with things that shouldn't exist, with horrors hiding in plain sight. I read every comment. I respond to as many as I can, and knowing that I'm not alone, that others have experienced trauma, that others understand. It helps. It really helps. What other topics would you like me to cover? What other stories do you want to hear? Should I talk about the aftermath, about the trial, about what happened to my family after everything came out? Should I discuss the other victims, the ones whose stories haven't been told yet, the families I've spoken with, the connections I've made with other survivors of family violence, of family secrets, of family horror? Let me know. Tell me in the comments, guide me, help me, decide what comes next. And if you or someone you know is dealing with trauma, with abuse, with secrets that are eating you alive, please reach out. Talk to someone, call a hotline, see a therapist. Don't suffer in silence like those victims did. Don't hide horror because you're scared or ashamed or confused. Speak up. Expose the truth. Save yourself. Save others before it's too late, before more lives are destroyed, before more families are shattered. Thank you again for watching, for listening, for caring. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember monsters are real. They walk among us, they look like us, they smile like us, and sometimes they're family. And that's the most terrifying truth of all.